to evacuate their home planet, two inquisitive Betelgeusians, Finzo and Vohladio, traveled on an interstellar evacuation ship with their entire species for thousands of years, ultimately getting themselves excommunicated for asking too many heretical questions. After downloading their minds into freshly synthesized primate meat bodies, they were unceremoniously chucked into the nearest launch pod and blasted to Earth. Now, they reside in human bodies on their new planet, searching the human canon for worthy knowledge to send back to their overlords, and maybe make their stay here a little more bearable. These are the Betelgeusian Blasphemers.
Okay, we're recording, and we can start podcasting whenever you're ready.
I thought we already were.
Well, the podcast doesn't start until I hit record.
Okay.
So now the podcast has started.
Do you want to start the podcast now?
Yeah.
Let's start. Okay, you start.
Okay, so
in this episode of the podcast, Finzo and I
are going to be discussing a book called Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah by a man named Richard Bach, written in the 1970s. So this was a little bit of a strange book. It's not extremely obvious what it's actually about. I would say that there's layers to the book. I would say that there's like part of the book has like poetry hidden within it, and then it has a lot of messages, and then it's packaged in like a very nice surface level story to like give you those messages and give you those lessons. So the story is actually about basically two men who make friends. One of them is a messiah that people are recognizing as a savior, but he gets tired of being a messiah, so he, quits his job, and he quits being a messiah, and then he leaves and changes what he's doing. He ends up becoming friends with somebody named Richard, and then throughout the book, imparting his wisdom of how of the things that he knows because he's a messiah. He ends up imparting this wisdom onto Richard, and then we can kind of see the transformation that Richard goes through as he himself starts to become his own messiah. And as readers, we can learn some of that wisdom as well.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary. The thing that I would add is like the main sort of underlying theme that they're talking about is that reality is just an illusion, and that all these miracles that this Messiah is performing, he is kind of frustrated at people that they just want to come see the show of a miracle. And he's like, oh, no, I'm showing you this miracle to like help you realize that if you just understand the same things that I do, you'll be able to do it too. But people are like, I don't want to do the hard work of understanding that kind of stuff. I just want to see you turn water to wine kind of thing. And I think that's why he gets like so frustrated that he like just quits his job as Messiah. And like throughout the book, there's this idea that we're like attached to our own limitations, and by letting go, we can kind of do the impossible. Like the more you strive for something, the harder it's going to be. There was one quote in there that I've kind of tried to commit to memory is, if you argue for your limitations, you'll get to keep them. And I really think that the whole idea of just the world being an illusion and you sort of building your reality up as you go is a really kind of profound message that he's encapsulated into this like story about people flying like old antique planes.
Yeah. There was like a deeper layer to the story where Donald Shimoda, the Messiah, gives a handbook to Richard. It's the Messiah handbook, and every time Richard opens it up to a random page, whatever's written on it is exactly what he needs to hear. And the book is just full of these like really profound poems.
Yeah, I really liked so the book itself is like not magical, and I think that was something that I really liked about this, is where he's saying like none of this is magic, like you just have to understand the underlying reality behind everything, and then this will all make sense. And
it didn't come with a sense of like Donald Shimoda is like a superhuman or superhero. It came with the message was that like anybody can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really like that about the book where he opens it up and you kind of see what is appropriate for you at the time. And you can kind of do that with any book, really. Um, I know some people, like I've heard of like people doing like tarot cards or something where you throw something down and then depending on where you are like that day, however you interpret that thing can help you reflect on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like depending on like what you're currently going through, it's going to skew how you interpret whatever's in front of you. So like
Mm-hmm.
whatever you see potentially could teach you a lesson, but like you're going to be biased to like perceive it in such a way that it like speaks to you.
Exactly. Like you could flip through the Bible and then find a passage and you're like, oh, this one. And it's like, oh, I can see how that applies to my life. And I'm not saying that that's like, it cheapens it at all. I think it makes it kind of, it's like a really good tool to reflect on your own inner workings because sometimes it's kind of hard to penetrate, right? But if you have a book that kind of acts as a catalyst for you to look or to interpret, then that's something that isn't like a cheap parlor trick. It's like an actual new useful tool.
Yeah. I'm going to do a throwback to Naval right now. He he said reality is neutral. It just reflects back at you whatever you put into it. So if you were to like open up in the book in this case the Messiah's handbook or in the real world like the Bible or really a tarot card or really anything, it functions as a mirror and it just reflects back to you like what you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
And it can function as a tool to help you know yourself better. I think that's what
Ex-
you're getting at, right?
yes, well, much better put than I could have done. Very well put.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I like your summary of why the book is called Illusions. I was gonna
mm,
one of my notes was to ask you the question, why do you think it's called Illusions? Because it's like not super obvious, but I think you nailed it. Like what do you think if you were to sum up like what are the main illusions that like apparently we're all seeing all the time according to this book?
yeah. So I think from what he was saying in the book is everything is an illusion.
Everything.
Everything. And I think there was a really good section where they go into a movie and he's saying like um, basically everything that you see is kind of like this movie screen, except you're the director, the person who's responsible for the lighting, you're the actor, everything. And so if you want to um, sort of change the script or whatever, you can do it. Like you have total control of that.
Like your life is a movie?
You're not like your life is the movie, but you're directing it. You are acting in it. It's all like your entire reality is sort of this not self-centered, but self-encapsulated world, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's kind of saying that all these things that are they're illusions and we get caught up in it because of like when you go to a movie, you never thinking, oh, this is just a bunch of pixels moving around with different colors on the screen. You're like engrossed in the story, right? You believe in the story when you're in the movie. And then as soon as it's over, you kind of jump out. But the thing is, with your life, you can't jump out of it.
Yeah.
Um,
If it's a
so you
good
sit,
movie, if it's a good movie, you get wrapped up in it.
yeah,
And if it isn't a high frame rate movie, you get wrapped up in it.
yeah, yeah. And I
You're
think there
gonna
was a lot of like, even if it's boring, you're choosing to watch it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen or heard of a concept called having no head?
No.
I've heard Sam Harris talk about it. I think he talks about it in his book on meditation. There's like this concept of having no head where um there's there's a meditation teacher. I wish I could remember his name right now, somewhere in the States. And he has a YouTube channel and like he gives some speeches. And like his teaching is basically like the world is always coming to you. Instead of like thinking of yourself as like in the world, realize that like you're the one consciousness in the world and everything is coming to you. Like whether you're sitting in your bedroom or sitting in your car or like on the other side of the planet, like you just have your field of vision and like you're the home base and everything is just coming to you. Like the whole world in front of you is just kind of a movie. Like your head doesn't exist in the world. It's like it's the point of awareness, like the only point of awareness in the world. I don't know, maybe I screwed that up a little bit, but it reminded me of that.
That's interesting. I think it's very similar. So he's saying, I think something a little different in this book, or maybe I'm just interpreting it like that, but that, yeah, the world is not just happening to you, but you have like an active role to play in it, in its creation, where instead of like everything just happening to you and you're perceiving it or ascribing some kind of valence to it, you are actually like that act of like interpretation is what makes the reality, if that makes sense.
Perceiving it makes it.
I think so. There's like there's a section in the book where he's saying you don't live in the same world as a stockbroker. He's
Yeah.
like, you are a guy who's like flying around on a biplane and in farm fields like selling rides for $3. How is your reality? How do you live in the same world as someone who's broking stocks? Um, and like I thought that was kind of like a really interesting point where it's like there's all these billions of people around you and they're inhabiting different worlds, and this was written in 1970 something, and I think that's back then maybe not such a well known idea, but I kind of feel more receptive to it now, considering that there's been so many conspiracy theories that are super wacky that people have just like sort of fully just gone full hog, decided to embrace, and their world that they're living in is different than mine,
Yeah.
you know. And that's an extreme example, but it really goes for all kind, like everybody has their own sort of world that they're creating on their own. I mean, we're all getting similar or the same information, but the way that information gets filtered is like completely different.
So the idea is basically that there maybe is not an objective reality, but in order for there to be anything, a person has to more or less be like living in the world and perceiving it in such a way, and then interpreting the facts that they're perceiving into like a story form in their mind. And then that creates the world, or at least the world in their mind, so that every individual person is living in a different world because they're perceiving everything slightly differently, like converting it kind of into a story in their mind slightly differently. And like the stockbroker and the guy who's like selling $3 rides in his airplane, they're living completely different lives, interpreting the world around them completely differently. Maybe both are valid, but they're also like extremely different. And since neither one of them is like 100% objectively true, they're both to some degree illusions. And if
Yeah.
those two people are both to some degree just watching an illusion, then everybody is. And what this Messiah is trying to teach is that like you can eventually break through that illusion, by following the teachings of this Messiah handbook. You can break through this illusion, break free, and really achieve ultimate freedom and do anything you want.
Yes. And I think, yeah, so that puts a little bit more weight on like the quote I said earlier, like the argue for your limitations and you'll get to keep them.
Yeah.
There's another thing where he says, if you keep telling yourself it's impossible over and over again, is that going to help you? Like, is that going to help you succeed? And another throwback to Naval, he's kind of saying like, pessimists are self-fulfilling. It's kind of this idea that you have to have the belief, or like he uses faith in the book a couple of times, but says imagination instead. He's like, that's what we're really talking about, is if you have the imagination to imagine the future that you want or the present that you want, then you can do it. And then there's one of those sort of quotes from in the Messiah Handbook that says, in order to live freely and happily, you have to sacrifice boredom, and it's not always an easy sacrifice. Which I think is kind of that idea of like, yeah, people have this sort of reality, and they may not be happy with it, but doing something radically new and completely different and living completely free is like very terrifying.
Mhm.
And like, I think there's other sort of ideas that, you know, enlightenment itself is a terrifying experience. And I think you mentioned last time where Sam Harris was having a debate with, I forget who you said, and the guy said, I like having an ego.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think
that's kind
Matt
of,
Dillahunty said that. He said it's useful to have the sense of self. And Sam
yeah.
argues that the sense of self is an illusion.
Hmm.
But some people think there's a utility in having the sense of self, despite maybe recognizing that it's an illusion.
Which is a different thing, I guess. But I mean, that's kind of interesting to think.
I think that it's maybe there's a utility in having it because getting rid of it is a painful experience. And it just comes like it's something like you can glimpse what existing without a sense of self would be like, but then you think I can't be like this all the time because there's like a weight of it, you know.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a very difficult state to maintain. Maybe that's what enlightenment is. It's like you can glimpse it, it's very difficult to maintain it. You can glimpse the fact, you can just glimpse the way that everything is an illusion. There's no real obligations in life. There's no shoulds. It's just what there is and what isn't, and what you want and what you don't want. And you can glimpse the fact that the only thing stopping you is your mind, but that means that you have to actually do everything you want to do, which is like really scary. So then you go, oh, no, I can't handle this. And you go back to that story that you tell yourself because it's comfortable, right? It comes with it kind of comes with a responsibility to actually live that way, right? And if you don't start living that way, then you go back to your old bullshit really quick.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's why sacrificing boredom is not always easy,
Yeah.
because you're stuck in that. You're not just like stuck, but you're like identifying with that's the way it is, you know. And then yeah, the whole a couple times in the book, the Messiah there, he says we're all free to do whatever we want to do, and I think that sounds kind of, and like when he's on a radio show in this book where he's kind of taking questions from the audience and they're phoning in and they're saying, well, like, you know, we can't all just do what we want to do. It would be a complete nightmare. Like it'd be chaos. He's like, no, if we all did whatever we wanted to do, we'd have like a perfect society.
He said we'd have the happiest planet in the galaxy or something.
Yeah, this side of the Milky Way. And I think like what the author is really trying to get at here is like, we do have the freedom to do whatever we want to do, but we're scared of doing it. Which for me was kind of an interesting point to make, because I think it is true for a lot of people, myself included.
Yeah, because if you identify what you want to do and then you don't do it, it kind of means that you don't really want to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to even start talking like what you want to do and stuff, it comes with an obligation or a responsibility to actually do it. And that's really scary. So it's easier to just believe that you can't do it, to give yourself an excuse to not have to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you just reminded me in the book, they're saying, oh shoot, I just lost it.
You want me to tell you some parts that I liked from it, and then maybe
yes,
you'll
please.
remember it afterwards?
Yeah.
So I think that like some of the I kind of like organized the illusions that they talk about into 4 groups. So the illusions are the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are. the limitations we put on ourselves by believing that we can't do things, the
Hmm.
memories and ideas that we cling to and can't let go of, and the obligations and the shoulds that we feel like, I should go back to school, I should work harder, I should work out, those kind of like should statements.
Hmm.
So like there's different parts, different chapters within the book where they kind of like break down those specifically. And one of the quotes that I liked from the handbook was, I'll just read it, it's not too long.
Hmm.
Learning is finding out what you already know. Doing is demonstrating that you know it. Teaching is reminding others that they know it as well as you. You are all learners, doers, and teachers. Your only obligation in any lifetime is to be true to yourself. Being true to anyone else or anything else is not only impossible, but the mark of a fake messiah. The simplest questions are the most profound. Where were you born? Where is your home? Where are you going? What are you doing? Think about those once in a while and watch your answers change. You teach best what you most need to learn. So if you ask yourself those questions, where were you born? Where's your home? Where are you going? And what are you doing? Those questions, like if if something in you has changed, those questions could kind of work like a mirror. Like we said before, they reflect back on you, like what what you want them to say or what you need in that moment. And I also like the part when it says, your only obligation in any lifetime is to be true to yourself. Being true to anyone else or anything else is not only impossible, but the mark of a fake messiah.
Hmm.
Um, because that's true. And like, yeah, it carries a lot of weight. Your only obligation is to be true to yourself. You have to know what you want. Um, you have to know yourself very well. So it's easier to try to be true to somebody else, to try to impress somebody else, or to try to do what society tells you to do. Um,
Yeah. I think I have, and like maybe the author or you have some can help me with this, but I think I have some reaction to that. That's like maybe I feel a little too practical about it.
okay.
Um, where it's like, yeah, sure. There's parts in here where he says like, it's cosmic law. Remember, like attracts like. Just be who you are, and then you'll sort of attract things that are like that will help you sort of move through this world or past this world, kind of thing. Um, that is what reminded me of the book The Secret,
Yeah,
where
there's
it's
some stuff
like,
in this book that reminded me of that too.
which is funny because The Secret was written in the 2000s, so this is like 40 years before. um but I do think that like there is a subtle sort of thing to say about it. Maybe there's a lot of self-defeating attitudes that people aren't, they're trying to be somebody they're not, and then being more like themselves will help them be happier. But then maybe being completely like themselves or like doing exactly what they want to do is not beneficial for them or for society or for anything really.
I think maybe they're just not like factoring in all the consequences when deciding what they want to do. Like if doing what you want to do and being yourself just like leads to some disaster in your life,
Hmm.
and I don't know, I mean, you could be smart enough to like see what would happen if I did this and then factor in those consequences, and then you genuinely wouldn't want to do it anymore when you recognize what it was going to lead to. Like if you just wanted to like spend the rest of your time partying, you might end up like broke, like with no money and like and nothing to show for it like 6 months later. So you're like, okay, I want to party right now, but then I know the consequences. I'm gonna end up with no money in 6 months. So I don't actually want to do that. Right.
Right. I think maybe. I mean, I think like there's definitely a certain burden of responsibility on the individual there that I'm not sure every human being has the capacity for.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I'm talking like myself included. I mean, I think I struggle with what I like, who I want to be, and like who I am, like this kind of juxtaposition, right? Like there's a certain element in here of fateful or fatalistic self-acceptance, where it's like, oh, well, I'm just going to be who I'm going to be, and then, fuck everyone else, kind of thing. And that kind of sort of fatalistic self-acceptance is just a nice scapegoat for being lazy. And there's another kind of like, maybe I'm hoping maybe what the author is getting at here is like a self-acceptance of like, yeah, I am who I am, and I'm going to be the best that I can be, kind of thing. And like one of those is an acknowledgement of shortcomings and like a forward moving improvement. Whereas the other is just like an acknowledging of I'm fine the way that I am, and nobody's going to change me, and I'm not going to make any kind of change at all. If that makes sense.
I don't know what to say. I
Yeah.
think in the book he talks about like the is, which is just means nature, and I think one of the messages is that we are part of nature, like we're part of the is, and you have to just accept nature. You can't argue with nature. It is just the way that it is, and we're part of it. So we also should just fully accept ourselves. But people, I mean, individual people, if they wanted to, could choose to use that as a reason to be lazy, like you said. Like, I don't need to improve. I'm fine just the way I am. I'm part of the is. I don't need to improve. Whereas, I don't know. Is that what you're trying to say? Like, it feels like it's just an excuse to like not try, or to not try to improve, or not try to be better.
Yeah. I think it also is like, if we're saying that, like I've often had this argument before that, you look at an anthill or a termite mound, like those 6-foot tall termite mounds, and you're like, oh, look at all this nature, kind of thing. And then, no single termite knows that it's building a mound. It's just like an emergent sort of structure based off of what the individuals are doing. And then when you look at a city of humans, like a human city, like the concrete jungle, you're like, wow, that's so unnatural, so unnatural. Like, wow, that's just like, I can't believe humans have made this artificial environment that they want to live in. But if everything is nature, which I think it is, I mean, right? Like everything is just like the natural order of things. There's nothing outside nature. There's nothing
It's almost like
super natural.
you can't act like unnatural. Like, it's almost like an oxymoron. Like
Yeah,
it's like a paradox. It can't exist in nature. Something unnatural can't exist within nature. You can't nest something unnatural within nature.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm saying like, maybe I'm going to argue against myself here the more I talk, but I'm thinking if humans are in this nature, which they are, then we've got certain capacities that do make us, I think, that make us unique in the nature that we know. And some of those things are podcasts, like cars. I don't know, just like basically most of the world that we observe with our eyes is this thing that makes humans special. And another really important thing there is like language and conceptualizing and foresight and like seeing the future. And that's seeing the future and conceptual thought stuff really is part of our nature. And if we're just going to accept how nature wants us to be, it is kind of that it wants us to be pushing ourselves or like moving towards something that's bigger than we are, or like progressing, right? Like I feel like humans have this natural instinct to just like poke stuff and see what happens over and over again, and to like say that you're just supposed to accept the way things are kind of feels like it's against the way humans are naturally built.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. No, I think I know what you mean. I think I agree with you. And I had a similar thought, but I didn't know how to articulate it. Like, while I was reading the book, I had a similar idea. It's
Uh-huh.
it's like, I think in the book, when it argues that you should simply accept, it's
Mhm.
talking about the type of acceptance where, remember at the very beginning of the book, there was a parable about those fish that were clinging to the rocks.
Yes.
Yeah, and then the one fish decided that he was just going to trust that the current of the river was okay, and he let go and started floating down the river. And at first he got like banged against some of the rocks, but then he started floating up higher in the river, and all the other
Mhm.
fish saw him float by and thought he was flying. So
Yeah.
he just decided to accept nature. He had just decided to accept like the flow of life, the current of life, and see where it takes him. I think that
Mhm.
when a book like this says that it's good to just simply accept nature, I think that's what it's talking about. Like you have to just go with the flow of life. Um, it it does go against human nature though, because although that it is human nature to poke things, right?
Yeah.
So
And
and
maybe it's a paradox, and
maybe it's
that's okay.
yeah,
I mean, I'm sort of starting to think that the only important truths about human existence are paradoxes, that anything less is probably false, if that makes sense.
yeah. So if you were gonna summarize this paradox, how would you summarize it? Would it be something along the lines of like um accepting nature, like you must accept nature and challenge it at the same time?
Yeah. Yeah. Or like, you have to fight to let go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good way
Like,
to put it.
it's really hard to work up the courage to just relax.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's like having a scheduler for your day and like scheduling relax.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a bad idea. I've been known to do that in the past.
I'm gonna relax
Um,
from 2 to 3 today. I'm gonna relax so hard.
yeah.
That reminds me of a part of this book that I liked about the disappearing clouds.
Hmm.
Um, Donald was teaching Shimoda how to like make clouds vanish. And so he was like working super hard. Like he would like pick a cloud and like focus super hard on it, trying to make it vanish. And then it wasn't working. He was getting frustrated. He asks Donald to do it. And Donald says, okay, pick a cloud. And then he picks one and then he looks back up and it's already gone. And
Hmm.
the exact quote from the book was negative attachments, Richard. If you really want to remove a cloud from your life, don't make a big production out of it. You just relax and remove it from your thinking. That's all there is to it. And I found that part to be memorable because it's something that I have trouble with. Like I try really hard to like not think about certain things, but in the meantime, I just end up thinking about them. Like thinking about not thinking about something is the same thing as thinking about it. So, but the answer really is as simple as just letting go, like just relaxing and removing it from your thinking. If you actually put effort into that, you fail by default.
Right. And I think that it's the same way they talk about meditation and enlightenment, right? Like the moment that you think you're enlightened, you failed, kind of thing. And it's like, have you ever heard there's a Buddhist saying where it's like, if you see the Buddha on a path, kill him. And
Oh,
it's like it's kind of trying to say like, if you are like progressing somewhere and then you see like this Messiah, um, get rid of him, because that's like another thing to get attached to.
okay.
And yeah, the disappearing clouds thing is kind of like, it's like to really succeed at something. I'm sorry to do this to you, but it's exactly like the game.
Oh man, you just
Sorry,
had
man.
to.
It's exactly like the game. The only way to win is to not think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you, and any effort is to fail.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay, that's such a paradox.
I again, yeah, I think that like I'm starting to think that most like people are human beings are averse to paradoxes. We don't even like things to be gray, like we like black and white. And like a paradox is like the ultimate kind of like nonsensical thing to
Black and
us.
white at the same time.
Yeah. And yeah, that's what I think. But I think yeah, the whole negative attachments thing, like it's kind of like I don't know. I've heard a lot of people recently getting pissed off about the royal family, either one side or the other. And I mean, both like there's good points to be made, and you can rightfully be angry. But if it's making you, maybe this is a poor example, but if you're um, attached to something that's like ruining your life, and like the more you think about it, the more like you are making it a part of your life, you know? Like if I was like quitting a drug or something, the more I thought about how much I'm going to be quitting this thing, will just like keep that in your mind. Like I was actually just listening to uh, Penn Jillette talk about his weight loss, and it was basically he's like, I decided to with my personal trainer we were going to treat it like a cult, and he's like, and I wasn't allowed to talk to anybody about it. Um, and I've heard sort of both sides of the story where if you like if you want to quit a drug, if you want to lose some weight or something, one way to do it is to announce to your friends or to have like an accountability buddy kind of thing, right? And that seems to be more popular. But there's another way where it's just like, just do it. Like sort of
Don't tell
shut
anybody.
up.
Just
Don't
do it.
tell anybody. Just do it.
When you talk about doing something, you don't do it. Like when you're sitting around telling your friends all the plans you have, like all the projects you're going to do, you get the same feeling from talking about it as actually doing it. So you just end up not doing it.
Yeah, and that's why I've there's studies showing that if you get people to come in to the lab and then you get them to imagine being really charitable, and like really get them to like feel the like, I did something really charitable, and then you have them walk out and like they think the experiment's over but it's still going on, and they have like a beggar outside and they're like, hey, can I have some money? The ones that you got to like imagine being charitable are less charitable in real life. So like
They've already they've already
they'll give them
expended
less.
they've already expended their charitable energy.
Yeah, or they already feel rewarded from doing it and they haven't done it already.
Maybe our imaginations are so powerful that we just can like imagine completing our task and then get the reward, the chemical reward for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like our bodies kind of think it's the same thing as actually doing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can't think about working out, or I will not. Like I just have to do it.
Yeah.
You
Just do
know,
it.
just do it.
Just shut up and do it.
Yeah, yeah. Like I think it's like there's a certain there's a we have a certain capacity to argue against ourselves or like convince yourselves of something that you don't want to do, and you have to kind of be your own parent in a way and like just do it. And
Yeah.
like the more you get rid of the mind in it, the better you're going to be at doing it.
If you're looking for advice on how to think less, the only good advice is like just stop. Just do it. Because if you start writing like paragraphs and paragraphs of like tips and tricks to like stop overthinking and stuff, you're actually just feeding the problem. The only answer is just do it.
I've never really thought about it like that before. Yeah, you're right. If you're making a pros and cons list of like how to stop or whether you want to quit overthinking,
Yeah.
you're
You
kind of in
can't,
deep trouble.
I think you can summarize it like you can't solve a thinking problem by thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I've told myself that before. Um, so going back to the like if you see a Buddha on the trail, you should kill them because it'll just give you something else to like to strive for. I
Mm-hmm.
think I don't know if this is actually like sort of like formalized, but like the ultimate paradox of spirituality is that if you're attempting to achieve enlightenment, you cannot achieve it because the attempt at achieving it by default means that you're not enlightened. So to become enlightened, it has to happen in an instant, which means that it can happen in any instant, like this one right now, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only way that you ever can actually achieve or glimpse enlightenment. It has to be done in a moment, and like no moment is better than any other moment. Like there's no reason why you can't just instantly become enlightened right now and let go of all the illusions. If you're thinking, I want to become more like this, tomorrow I'm going to be more like this, that means that like you have an image, like an abstract idea in your mind that's like a little bit ahead of you, and you're here and you're always chasing it, and the closer you get to it, the farther away it goes, and that never stops. And so I think that's where the should statements come from. Like, I should be more relaxed, I should work harder, I should go for a run. Those never ever end. It's just an infinite list of should statements, and you just like tyrannize yourself mentally with them, and they never ever stop. So maybe the advice of like simply accepting yourself is kind of a way of like making those should statements shut up once and for all. And it doesn't mean that you become lazy. It just means that you're no longer yelling at yourself mentally. It just means that you're no longer like tyrannizing yourself. It doesn't mean, unless your nature is laziness, in which case be lazy. You're not going to be lazy if you just stop like beating yourself up. In fact, you might have more energy because you won't be sitting or thinking. You'll just do the workout and then get on to the next thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Getting into
I think
that constant flow state where you're just naturally doing the next thing, that your instinct, like, do you think that animals think, or do you think that they're just in a constant flow state of like instinct to instinct to instinct?
I think animals think. I think that it's a lot different than what we think.
Okay.
I think that like there's a immediacy to it. That's not like, I think that there's no future planning, and there's not a lot of past ruminating
Or questions.
Yeah. I think it's more of like a uh thinking about your surroundings now, and that's it. Like there's no like, oh, I think like when you leave a dog alone, um it's just like kind of like, it's not sad that you're gone. It's just like there's not a lot going on right now. And then as soon as you come back, it's like, whoa, yes,
Now
that is
there's
the
something going
best.
on.
Yeah, now stuff's happening. This is great. And then that's kind of it, I think. And there might be, I think the more advanced a species is, like if you want to talk about elephants, dolphins, and like primates, then you get more of that sort of future planning. Um, like it's kind of like just like an expanding window, like an expanding sort of circle of like how much in the past and how much in the future you are able to engage with.
Cool.
Yeah.
What did you think about the part in the book where Donald says that he just like became a pilot because in his mind he just decided that he was a pilot, and then he just instantly became a pilot, and then he told Richard that he could do the same thing. If you want to, you can just decide that you know how to play the guitar, and then pick it up and play it. And when you're taking lessons for 3 years, you're really just like, it's taking you 3 years to like defeat the belief that you can't play it, and then you start playing it. Whereas if you could defeat that belief instantly, you could become a master guitarist right away. What did you think of that?
I mean, that's a very old idea in philosophy. I think that goes back, I think that's what people refer to as Platonicity, if I'm not wrong.
Never heard
Where
of
it's
it before.
like Plato had this, I think it was Plato. My philosophy is not as good as it should be. Um, I think Plato had this idea that there are ideal forms.
Yeah, the land
And
of the forms.
yes, and then basically the only time you're ever learning something is you're uncovering what you already knew. Like the soul is this perfect soul thing that knows everything. Then anytime you learn something, you're actually remembering it. And that's why he had this sort of Socratic method, which was like, well, like I'm going to ask you questions to try and help you remember what you already know. And anytime someone draws a triangle, what they're trying to do is approach that ideal form. Even if we never truly get there, we are kind of like remembering most of what we already know.
So we have the ability to tap into the land of the forms where the perfect image of everything is, just in a conceptual way. And we can never get there fully, but we can tap into it to a certain extent. And when we think that we can't, or when we're learning something, we're just like shedding the belief that we can't.
Yeah, and I think that this book is kind of a maybe like a direct sort of descendant of that, because in a way it's the opposite that we think about, like you have to like acquire stuff, and like you were saying, it's anytime you try to acquire spirituality or like get
By
more.
definition, you're not getting it.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like anytime you try, and the more grasping you do to like get more stuff, the more weighed down you're going to be. And then like the more you just like sort of like, I think it's like we think that our problem is we don't have enough, but it's actually that we've got too much. And we have to like get rid of stuff and like peel back the layers to get to what we want to, rather than pulling things in from the outside.
So it's like the turning a bush into an elephant. You actually shave the bush away instead of grow it into the shape of the elephant.
Yeah,
The elephant's
exactly.
already inside the bush.
Yeah, yeah. And I think
That's what you told me.
Michelangelo said the same thing about his sculptures. He's like, inside the block of stone is the sculpture. I just have to figure out where to sort of hit the chisel.
What parts to remove?
Hmm. And from what and like I think in the Catholic tradition they call it spiritual pride, where like you're like, I'm so holy, and they consider that to be a sin. It's kind of like baked into the priesthood there, and it's baked into Buddhism and other, I assume other traditions as well, where it's like it's kind of like
Humility
a
is the path to wisdom.
yeah, but you can't. It's again, you can't look at it too hard, because if you're trying to be humble,
You're
you're
not.
not.
I'm so humble, man.
Yeah. I'm the humblest person I think I've ever met. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's that kind of thing where you can't pull things in to get rid of stuff.
Cool. Did you like the book overall?
Yes.
Me too.
I think that like this was one of those, so I read the EPUB, like online book, like on a tablet. I think I'm going to get the paper copy of this one.
Cool.
Yeah, just
Flip
in
around,
case.
highlight stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
I would love to take all the excerpts just of the Messiah Handbook.
They
And
wrote one.
I was just gonna say, like, I bet you could just Google it and you find it all, and it would just be like one big long poem. Really
Mm-hmm.
nice.
Yeah, they actually published one where it has like sort of what's in the book and then other ones as well that sort of all fit the same kind of theme. And there's no numbers to the pages, so you can just open it up and
Well, and they change
again.
every time you close the book, it changes. So all you have to do is like,
That's what they say.
what a good author, eh? Richard Bach, because he had to write all that. He had to write the Messiah Handbook to put it inside this book. He kind of he this actually reminds me of another question I was going to ask you. Um, do you think that we need to understand everything in the form of a story? So even if we're reading nonfiction and we're just reading a list of facts, we actually convert it into a story before we can understand them.
I don't think we have to, but I think it's I think it'd be like no, okay, I don't think we have to, but I think that it makes it a hell of a lot easier.
I kind of think that we have to.
Yeah.
In a way, yeah, because I was thinking about this book. If it was written just in like a point form thing, like all of these lessons that we've kind of extracted from this book, if they just wrote them in their bare bones, boring form, it wouldn't really like pack a punch. It wouldn't like deliver it. So the story, like just the simple story of like these two guys meeting and becoming friends, it's like a nice like sugar coated pill that like makes it easy to swallow. Sometimes I think that even if we're reading a nonfiction book and just getting pure information, we're actually like, maybe I'm just describing my experience, creating some kind of like theater in our mind where I'm like picturing like the repercussions of this, or I'm like picturing stuff moving around, like diagrams moving, or like people I know in real life, examples in my real life of like this concept happening. I'm essentially
Mm-hmm.
like converting it into a story before I understand it. And it made me wonder, like, why are like, was it necessary for this book to be written? And to be written in a story form to be so effective at communicating. And I think maybe it was.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I think like, yeah, I mean, if you're trying to learn like math facts or something, a story is probably not going to help that much. But if you're trying to learn something that is getting at more of like a emotional side, then I think the story is required, because you can read like quote after enlightening quote and just be like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, like that's just another great enlightening quote, one after the other. But to have it sort of embedded in a story, it's the reason why the Bible is a narrative. It's the reason that all these religious traditions have narratives, and like we have moral stories. Like it's kind of part of our nature. Um,
This
all
is
and I
the is ought problem.
Yes.
How do you go from an is to an ought? Some people argue there has to be a narrative structure between. I think Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson debated it.
Going from an is to an ought.
Yeah, I think that was, I believe, Immanuel Kant proposed that problem. Like, how do you think a list of facts and then derive morals or values from them? Some people argue like it's not obvious how you make that jump, and some people argue that in between there's a narrative structure. Everything has to be converted into a narrative before you can derive some sort of like moral ought or value from it.
I think that's the first time I've ever heard about that. But I think that makes sense if you look at sort of the divisive issues that we have going on socially today. The people are looking at the same facts and having two radically different stories, which informs their morals, right? Like if you look at like abortion, people are looking at the same facts. They have the exact same facts. One is taking it to be murder, and one is taking it to be a sort of lessening of suffering, right? For the parties involved. And like also like there's issues of like autonomy of your own body. The other one is like sanctity of life. And they're both looking at the same fact, but they've got these different moral reactions to it because of the story that they apply over top.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they interpret the facts differently, and then they're arguing the values, but they have different sets of values.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Which
Or
is
they're
just going back
prioritizing different
to,
values.
yes, exactly. Which is just why they're going back, like even in this book where they're saying, do you think you live in the same world as somebody else? I mean, maybe you are receiving the same reality, but the story you overlay on it is completely up to you.
Do you have anything else to add? Any more parts? Oh wait, I have one more question for you.
Sure.
Why do you think that he wrote in the story that Donald, the Messiah, was martyred at the end? He died at the end of the book. Why do you think that was necessary, and what do you think it meant?
I kind of felt like it helped me understand my Christian friends a little more. Because he was saying at the beginning, like imagine a Siddhartha or a Jesus comes down today, kind of thing. And it helped me kind of think like, okay, so say they're dead, but then a lot of Christians will say like, oh, well, Jesus is everywhere. And if you want to put it in this kind of dimensional shift kind of thing where they're on our realm, and then when they're dead, they're somewhere else or everywhere or nowhere at once kind of thing. It's like, I think it was kind of like it was a nice like time and space are just the way they are in our reality. That's just the way they are here, but it doesn't mean they have to be like that. Like I remember listening to a physicist talking about like if you imagine space as this like hills and valleys, say, and you're on a hill and then over on some other hill, or you're in one valley and there's a hill between you and then there's another valley, you can't like communicate with that other valley, right? But if you have like a car, you can drive over the hill, go into the next valley, and then now communicate with someone in the next valley. And the thing is like space and time are kind of this similar thing. So there's no reason you can't go to from one valley of time to another valley of time, right?
You can't. You can probably affect your passage through time. So time is basically just, from what I understand, it needs to be going in one direction, and the rate at which you travel in that direction can be manipulated based on a couple of things, like whether you're inside of a gravitational well or like how fast you're moving through space. You can never go back in time. You can slow the rate at which you're going in time, but you can never go back. And the arrow of time is like basically just determined by entropy, the fact that things are always moving from order into chaos. So basically the definition of time is basically just that, like, at 2 points along this thing that is measurable, at one point there's going to be more chaos in the universe than at the other point. And that is what the definition of time is and why it has a certain direction. So I think you can probably, I don't know if you could go between valleys necessarily, if like the valleys of time, but you can't go backwards in time.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying. As far as we know anyway. But I think like what I'm trying to say is like he was martyred at the end just to kind of say like, you know, this life is just life kind of thing. Nobody kind of gets out of here alive, and that's it.
Yeah.
And there was one quote that I kind of thought that really summed it all up. He said, "There's the shock of that sharp, cold change, the pain of it for a second, and then accepting it is a swim in reality." So I think he was
when
kind
does the change come, at death or at another point?
yeah. So there's like the pain of it for a second, and then like it's kind of like jumping into a freezing cold lake. It's like it's kind of painful, and then the next thing you know, you're kind of in this other place.
Like that fish letting go, banging against the rocks, and then eventually floating down the current a little bit higher than the rocks.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
the transition from normal person to Messiah has like a painful transition, but then you're flowing.
Yep.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think that was kind of like a capstone to say like this book is about life, and I'm not going to talk about death, but I think it's the same thing. That to go from regular person to Messiah, you let go and it's painful and then you're fine. To die is to have a bit of pain, you let go, and then you're fine. I think it was Ram Dass said nobody screws up dying. Like you're all gonna do fine at it. So
because the only measurement of how good you are at dying is like whether or not your heart stops beating.
yeah, he's like, don't worry about it so much. You're gonna die. It's gonna be fine.
Yeah, you're not gonna screw it up. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the book he died because wanted to show that people resist his teachings. Like given the choice, people choose the ego. People choose the illusions. Given the choice, they don't want to go through that uncomfortable transition of letting go of the illusions. So they cling to the illusions, and then they get rid of the guy who's telling them otherwise, who's like sowing seeds of dissension into their society. They want to get rid of him.
Yeah, I think that's true too. I think like that the whole reason he quit his job was because of that. Like he quit his job as the Messiah because people were just like, nah, I mean, I don't think so. That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, and he didn't want to like force his teachings on people.
yeah. I think like there's a certain part of that in my everyday life where it's like I have to go through these sort of painful, like just waking up in the morning is kind of like that. You know, there's like that certain period where you're like, oh, I'm awake and I have to like get out of bed. Like there's this hard,
this like brick wall of thoughts hit you like a few seconds after you wake up.
And you're like, you gotta like push through it. And
and so people who just have an alarm clock and like jump right out of bed, that's kind of like people who jump into a cold shower first thing in the morning.
Yeah, they're dodging the brick wall of thoughts as it's coming towards them.
Yeah, they're not giving themselves a chance to sit around thinking. They're just doing. They're just doing it.
Just do it. Yeah. I've been trying to have cold showers recently because of basically this. Like the contrast is nice, like being content through contrast. And then trying to notice myself, convincing myself not to turn the knob to cold once I'm in there
Yeah.
is kind of fun.
Yeah, like it gives you like it's an object of meditation, a cold shower.
Hmm.
You can see the resistance in yourself. I've had times in my life when I'm just like jumping into cold lakes a lot because it's like that moment of like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And then all of a sudden you switch like, I'm actually going to do this. Oh shit, I don't want to do this. And then you jump. Next thing you know, you're submerged in the water, and it's like just going through that transition feels like a ride. And it's such a good metaphor for so much in life that it's really good, and to do it over and over again, and not just like once. Like, oh yeah, I remember this time I jumped in a cold lake in April back in 2004. No, you got to do it all the time, like every day. Then sometimes I don't. Then sometimes I don't. Like I haven't jumped in anything cold in a while. I start to like get a little bit more rigid. Like, oh, I don't want to do that these days. But that's when you need to do it the most.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's like being in a groove.
Yeah. Any last thoughts? Anything you'd like to add?
I want to read more of this guy's stuff.
Did you say that he wrote a sequel?
He wrote a sequel to this in quite later, actually. I think he might have wrote it in 2014, like as an older guy.
Interesting. That would be interesting to see how it changed. He just writes like, by the way, guys, that last book I wrote, just ignore that. that was all bullshit. Can't believe you guys fell for that.
Oh man, that would be pretty funny. Yeah, I'd like. Yeah.
This guy he must have been a young guy when he wrote this book.
If I've got my dates right, then yeah.
Might have been in his 30s or 40s.
Or he might be just like really old.
He might be really, really old now, and he might have been like 60 when he wrote this book, and then 100 when he wrote the sequel.
Yeah, you never know.
Maybe this book feels like an older person would have had to write it. Somebody with a lot of wisdom and experience. Like if this guy wrote this book at age 30, I would be impressed.
Yeah, I would feel like I need to get my shit in gear.
You would feel like you were passing Buddha on the path.
Yeah, I'd have to kill Richard Bach. Okay. Yeah, so that was Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah by Richard Bach. We talked about a lot of stuff here today. We talked about seeing the Buddha on the path and killing him. We talked about the game. Sorry, everybody. We talked about how to make clouds disappear by not thinking about them. And basically, the main takeaway was to just do it and stop thinking so much.
I could not have said it better myself. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.
If you humans have any questions, comments, complaints, or recommendations for future things to send back to the overlords, please send us an email at beetlejuicyandblasphemers@gmail.com. And thank you for listening.